So just turn that on. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I might have met some of you last week in Te Awamutu. My name's Valerie. I'm from the Zero Waste Network. I work as the coordinator of the National Regeneration Not Incineration campaign. And I just would like to open with a very quick karakia. Tuia I runga, tuia I raro, tuia I waho, tuia I roto, tuia te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka ranga te ao, haumi e hui e, tae ki e. Kei te mihi kia koutou.
Hello, and I'm Donald.
I might just ask if people can just mute themselves for the time being. And what we'll do is we'll just go through the zero waste guide. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to post in the chat a few links. So I've posted those in the chat, and then I'm going to share my screen with everybody, which I hope will. There we go. So can everyone see the community submission guide? Okay.
Thanks, Valerie. Yes.
Yep, great. Thank you. So I just want to go through this with you all. And Simon, if you can just keep an eye on people coming in, that would be super helpful. I'm just going to see if I can move this.
Will do. Yeah.
Toolbar a little bit so that I can just keep getting these notifications. So as a lot of you probably know, there are actually two submissions to be made. One of them is to the Waipā District Council, and one of them is to the Waikato Regional Council. And they cover off slightly different things. And it would be great if you want to make a submission to both of them. We would encourage you to make submissions to both of them. And in fact, you can use the same submission to both of them. You don't need to write something different for both of the councils, but you can, you can certainly use the same submission. So what I'd like to ask everybody to do is, if you're on your computer, you might like to look at the community submission guide, and you'll see at the top there's a link to the Waipā District Council and to the Waikato Regional Council. Those are actually to the applications. And so those will take you into the company's documents, which can be quite difficult to sort of wade through. But I gather from the Facebook group that lots of you are able to do that and are getting stuck into some of that stuff. There is a lot of information there. We'll go through some of that stuff. But if you scroll down, you see this area that's highlighted in yellow, and that's the council form 13. And what the councils have asked people to do is to use these forms to file your submission. Now you can attach your actual submission to this, or you can use the form to write your submission if you like. So if I click on this Word document, it will take me to a document that wants to download directly to my computer.
Yeah.
Nick,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nikki,
Yeah, I think we talked to Marcus about it too, didn't we? Or is it foreign?
Nikki, can I get you to mute yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think, you know, you wouldn't be better as well.
So if you click on that link on our submission guide, it brings up this submission on a notified resource consent application form 13. This is for the Waipā District Council. And as you go through here, you will see that there are some very specific questions that they're asking you. Obviously, they're asking you your contact details. But if you scroll down, there's some very specific questions that they're required to ask you by law. And one of them is that you're not a trade competitor and you're not directly affected by the application. And then you can go down and you can say, I support parts of the application, I oppose parts of the application, or all of the application. And then you say, I can seek the following decision from the consent authority. And the decision that we're seeking is to decline the application. So that's what we would ask people to put in there, or you can say, reject the application or some wording to that effect. We would also encourage people to say that you do want to be heard so that you can give an oral submission. If it comes to the time of giving oral submissions and you decide you don't want to give an oral submission, or for some reason you're not able to, at least you've preserved that opportunity. So if you say you don't want to be heard now, then they definitely won't contact you. But if you say you do want to be heard, then you can make up your mind later if you're not sure. But it's really great to have people in the community talking to these to their submissions. And the last little thing on that sort of that second page there is, I've served a copy of my submission on the applicant. So we actually need to send a copy to the company. And on the zero waste form, I've put the email address of a guy called Richard Falconer, and he's the person at the company that we're supposed to send it to. So all of this is, more complicated than it should be. The last page, there's a question up the top. It says, I request or do not request, pursuant to Section 100A of the Resource Management Act, that you delegate your functions, powers, and duties to hear and decide the application to one or more hearing commissioners who are not members of the local authority. At this stage, I would recommend that you say you do not request that, because what happens if you request that is that they assign the costs of the commissioners to you. As it is now, the application will be heard by independent commissioners. So there's no chance that it's going to be the local. It's not going to be the local council that's going to hear this. So I don't think you need to worry about that. So you can say, I don't request that. Yeah. So then it just asks you to put your signature. It says a signature is not required if you make a submission by electronic means. So you don't actually, so you can fill this form out on your computer, on your Word document or whatever, or you can print it off. But if you just use your Word document, you can simply fill it out and you can save it with your name. And then you can send that back to them. So on this particular form for the Waipā District Council, they've only given you 3 lines to say what your view is. Obviously, you might have quite a lot more to say than that. So it's perfectly okay to add more pieces of paper or to type on a separate piece of paper and just attach that to your submission. Yeah, so you don't need to use. They like the form because it makes sure that everybody answers all the questions that they want. But it's not necessarily actually to limit yourself. At the moment, my submission for the Zero Waste Network is about 45 pages for the Waipā District Council. So that's the actual form for the Waipā District Council. And if we jump back over to the internet, you'll see on the Waikato Regional Council, we've got Global Contracting Solutions. And again, I'm just going to post these links in the chat again, because there's a bunch of people that have jumped on the call here that probably weren't here when I first shared it. I'm just having a look at everyone's chat. So the Regional Council has got some has got a few things on this page here. And what that includes is down, if we scroll down, it's got the applicant's documents here. and it's got a request for further information. And I'll explain what that is. The Section 92 is a requirement under the Resource Management Act. Once the regional council has received the application from the company, they've looked at the application and they've gone back to the company and they've asked them a bunch of questions. And that document is the questions that they've asked them. And these are the answers to those further questions. So it is useful to read that. It sometimes expands on what the company is thinking, or possibly it tells you that it's actually that they don't really have a very good answer for the council's questions. Yeah. So again, here's an email here for the companies that needs to receive a copy of your submission. Richard Falconer at Terra Group, and they're one of the consultants that's working on the job. So here we got the Waikato Regional Council submission form. Unfortunately, both of these submission forms are actually different. This one's a PDF, not a Word document, but that's okay. The nice thing about this form is that you can actually fill it out online. So you can type directly into there. You can type your name. You know, I can type Zero Waste Network, whatever. I can type that, and then when I go up to this download button, it will ask me, do I want to download it with the changes that I've made, the stuff that I've added in? And I can say yes. Or you can just download it to your computer and fill it out and save it with your name. The regional council has given you a little bit more space to actually make your submission. And again, ask you for what your decision is, or what the decision that you want from the regional council. So what you're saying is, I want you to decline the application. And again, asking, do you want to be heard in support of your submission? And the other thing is we would encourage you to say yes, that you would consider presenting a joint case if others make a similar submission. It's not necessarily that you would make a joint submission, but it means that if lots of people are saying the same thing, you might all get together and sort of say that together. So you can say yes or no in that case. It's really up to you. Again, if you're filing this electronically, it's not necessary to sign it. You can just save it with your name and send it as an email, and you can copy the company in on the document. So both of those documents need to be filled out on the community submission template. So this is the community submission guide. We've got some of the details here. When you're ready, you email to Waipā District Council, that address copied with the company over here, regional council, and again, the company address. The regional council and the district council have told me that if for some reason someone sends a submission to one that's actually meant for the other or whatever, that they will pass them on. If you're just writing one submission and you want to submit it to both, just be really clear with this detail up the top. The application, this detail here, the application number, there's two different numbers. One's related to the district council, one's related to the regional council. So you can put in your submission that you're actually responding to both of those applications. So I just want to go through very quickly because I just want to leave some time for you all to ask questions or anything else that might be on your mind out there. I know there's another public meeting on tomorrow night, which is awesome. But some of the things to raise in your submission, certainly at the start of the zero waste submission, I'm putting in details about why the Zero Waste Network is interested in this, why we're making a submission in the first place, why do we care about this? So for local people in Te Awamutu, many of you will have your own reasons for opposing this. Maybe for you, you've got, you don't want a toxic incinerator in your community. You think it's the bad choice. You don't want rubbish being brought into your community. You might have a personal story. You might have a niece or a nephew or a daughter or a grandmother or whatever that's got asthma, and you don't want more air pollution in the community. So it can be useful to personalize your story and tell a little bit about where you're coming from. If you've got any background in this area, it can also be helpful to talk a bit about that. So when we were in fielding, working with the fielding community, there was a woman who had been a part of the waste advisory team up at Auckland Council. She'd worked up there for many years and she'd retired in fielding, and she came along and made a submission, and she talked quite a lot about her experience in that kind of world. So some of you might have relevant experience. You might have experience with regard to earthworks or waterways or any of that kind of stuff that you feel like you want to make comments about. You absolutely should do that. So there's just a few things that I've put into the submission guide. There's so many different points to this application that you could talk to. Some of the things I've pulled out, including that this is untested technology. So I want to be really clear, New Zealand does not have any waste to energy incinerators in operation in the country anywhere. So this would be brand new technology for the country. And so it is really untested here. So that's one of the main reasons why we really don't want it. But we've talked about the air, water, and land pollution, the land use and the where the land is sited, the flooding issues, climate change, which is a really big issue, hazards, risks, toxic ash, and other byproducts. The feedstock. So feedstock is the word that describes the various streams of rubbish that they're talking about. So this is the plastics, the tires, and the mixed solid waste and the flock. And it seems from the application that the company doesn't have a really good idea of where this stuff is going to actually come from. They don't have any contracts to deliver on this, and that's really worrying because they might build this facility and without any feedstock, they might just start burning whatever it is that they can get their hands on. And so we would be quite worried that not only would they be potentially burning recyclable materials and reusable materials, but they might also be burning stuff that they're really not allowed to be burning, like toxic waste. And that's a real worry. If they don't have adequate supplies of feedstock that they can demonstrate, then we have to worry about what exactly it is that they're going to be burning. And I think one of the last things I put, but is certainly not the last issue, is human health. And human health is a major issue, obviously, for the community. I posted in the Facebook group today a story about Mount Maunganui and about the air pollution in Mount Maunganui. Air pollution is a really serious issue in New Zealand. There's 3,000 premature deaths in New Zealand every year from air pollution. So that's 3,000 people that would not have died that year as a result of air pollution. And I think in Waipā district, there's about 35 people a year that die prematurely from air pollution. So it's not a kind of a side issue. It's a major issue. And one of the things that's really not thought very much about in terms of this application is the cumulative effect of that air pollution over time. So people are, impacted by this stuff every single day. And some of these things do bioaccumulate in our bodies. So dioxin, for example, accumulates in the fat cells of our bodies, and it essentially never goes away. So a lifetime of exposure to dioxin is not the same thing as saying, oh, well, our dioxin emissions are below the national air quality standard. So what you or your children might be being exposed to every day is really quite a different thing. And so as it is right now, this application has no human health assessment. We know from over in New South Wales and Victoria, they both require human health assessments as part of any waste energy incinerator application, and they work quite extensively with public health authorities to ascertain what the public health impacts are. So that really should be very front and center for people in the community. So yeah. I'll put at the end, once you've sent your submission, please encourage your friends and family to submit. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now. And I just really want to let a couple of people in there. And I just really want to open things up for questions, if people want to ask questions, I see Trudy's said over here. On the Waipā District Council form, the applicant is Global Contracting Solutions. The applicant, the company name is Global Contracting Solutions, and Global Contracting Solutions and Global Metal Solutions are effectively the same people. This is just a different company name that they've given this particular part of their enterprise. So, can we are recording this session, and this will be on the Zero Waste Facebook, or excuse me, the Zero Waste YouTube channel. I'll post a link on the Facebook group tomorrow. On the Waikato Regional Council form, you should have your own name. Yeah, so you're doing your own name. So when we go to the Regional Council form, you're just filling that out as if it were your own submission, and you can cut and paste from the submission guide if you like. You're absolutely welcome to do that. But I would encourage you all to think about what it is in your own lives that motivates you and concerns you most about this proposal. So it might be some of the things that I've highlighted, but it also might be other things that you're concerned about. So lots of you, frankly, will know the community and know the area much, much better than I do, and have really good ideas about ways in which might be impacted. Obviously that whole area is due to be developed. The old race course is due to be developed as residential housing. And gosh, the impact on that, new residential housing is crazy. So, I'm just having a look at some of these questions. If I'm involved with multiple businesses, can I make submissions from each individual businesses? Yes, absolutely. Has any effort been made to expose this to the mainstream media? Yes, there have been a couple of news articles about this. And yesterday we sent out a media statement, and I think there'll be another article in the Waikato Times. And we also got a contact from the Te Awamutu Courier and from Radio New Zealand. So hopefully there will be more, but I would encourage you all to contact the media, to contact and write letters to the editor, to say to the media, why aren't you all talking about this more? Because I said to them more than a year ago, I said, why don't you stop talking about waste to energy and start talking about the fact that this is an incinerator? Because people don't actually understand that this is an incinerator that we're talking about. Family members do not have to be over 18. No, you can be, yeah. Should my wife and I submit separate submissions or should be combined? Graham, that's really up to you. If you feel like you would both like to make submissions, I think the more submissions, the better. The council, the commissioners need to know that people in the community don't want this in their community. But what I would say is I would just really encourage you all to tell your story about what it is that concerns you about this. So, yes, there are some links. Sorry, Rob and Renee, I think you joined us late, so I will post those links again in the chat here. I just have I work at a preschool. My boss would like to make a submission on behalf of all of our families who would like to add their names. Is this okay? Absolutely. Yes, that's a wonderful name. That's a wonderful idea. Coming from the preschool would carry quite a lot of impact. I think, particularly for people who are involved in community groups, if you're involved with your church or businesses, I think all of those things particularly add weight. What is the time frame next steps after submission if their applications did? Okay, so I'll tell the time frame. So the submissions close on the 13th of October. After that, the councils, the two councils, the Waipā District Council and the Waikato Regional Council, are going to get together and they're going to appoint they're going to appoint probably 3 commissioners. And those 3 commissioners because there is a real there's a real demand for resource consent commissioners. They may not be available until sometime in the middle of next year. So it may be quite some time. I'm not able to tell you specifically when the hearing will be. In the meantime, the two councils are going to go away and they're going to look at all the submissions that they've received, and they're going to write a report. So they're going to write a report to the commissioners, and they're going to lay out what the councils themselves think about the proposal. And at that point, it is very likely that the district council and the regional council will both say either that they recommend that consent be approved or they recommend that consent be declined. So I guess what I want to encourage you all to think about, and maybe to put into the meeting tomorrow night, is that in the next 6 months, you probably have about 6 months before the actual hearings, is that you need to be putting pressure on your councils to let them know that you don't want this, that you want them to tell the commissioners that they should decline these applications, that the community does not want these and does not think that this is a safe, appropriate, or reasonable proposition for Te Awamutu. So what happens is, once the hearing is called next year, that might be 3 or 4 days. It depends on how many people want to make oral submissions. So what happens then is the company gets to go first. They present all of their evidence to the commissioners, and the commissioners ask them lots and lots and lots of questions. They typically bring along some experts, and they bring along some lawyers. And one of the big things about this particular application is that they're saying that they're not actually that climate change can't be taken into account because they filed this application before the law change. They're also trying to argue that they're not subject to the emissions trading scheme, which is not true. They are subject to the ETS. So some of these things we'll be bringing out. But once the company finishes at the hearing, then it will be open for the public to make submissions. And so organizations like the Zero Waste Network, individuals, people in the community, other interested businesses or community organizations, anybody who wants to make an oral submission will be given time to make an oral submission. And sometimes they don't give you much time. They might give you 10 minutes to make your oral submission. The Zero Waste Network intends to call some expert witnesses. So we, along with making our own oral submission, we will be bringing a couple of experts with us to talk to some of the specific processes of the application. That, we're not experts in incineration. We're not chemical engineers. So we'll be bringing along some people like that to help us. And it's our understanding that the district health board, or what used to be the district health board, is bringing along an air quality expert to speak to air quality issues. So once the hearing closes, it is possible that the commissioners will say that they need more information from the company. In the case of Fielding, the company went away with pages and pages of questions that the commissioners had. And so the commissioners gave them quite a lot of time to answer more questions. And we then went into a process where they answered questions, and then we could make further submissions. And that kind of went back and forth a couple of times. And then, believe it or not, in Fielding, the resource consent commissioners said, we're going to have another 3 days of hearings. And we were really surprised by this, because by this time our expert had actually shown that their air quality data was fabricated. And so we were really surprised that they wanted to have another 3 days of hearings, but they did. But before that could happen, the company withdrew its application because they knew they were going to fail.
Is it the same company?
Yeah.
So that's not the same company as this company. But that's certainly my best experience, I guess, with the resource consent process. So once the hearing closes, The councils once again can make a report to the commissioners based on anything that's come out of the hearing. And then the commissioners will go away, and I think under law, they have around 15 days to issue a judgment. So once a judgment is issued, once they say, well, the application is
I thought you said
approved,
let's hope.
or it's approved with conditions, or it's declined,
Right.
then it can be appealed. And so it can be appealed by, if it's declined, which is what
But
we
that
have,
means it's
then the
big.
company would have to appeal to the Environment Court. If it's approved, then we would have to appeal to the Environment Court. So we would have to file legal papers in the Environment Court. We'd have to say we want to take this to the next step, and then we would continue the fight in the Environment Court. So those are kind of some of the steps. So someone's asking me, I thought the commissioners were independent, or do the councils choose who reviews this? There is a pool in New Zealand of people who are qualified to be commissioners for resource consent hearings, and they all have particular specialities depending on what the resource consent application is. And so there will be a pool of commissioners that they can pull from, but they need to have the relevant experience. So it's not so much the council does choose them, but it chooses them based on sort of their qualifications. We do need to be obviously careful, because many of the environment commissioners do have links to industry in one way or another. And so we just need to be cautious and aware that that's a possibility. I'm not clear whether or not we could ask, if we feel like somebody's not going to give us a fair go, we might ask for a different commissioner to be appointed. I'm not sure what the process is for that, but I certainly could find out. What value can those of us who don't live in Waipā add to submissions? Lisa asked, and Bree was thinking the same thing. I guess what I would say is this proposal has impacts for all of Aotearoa New Zealand, right? This is half of New Zealand's tires, right? So, and the climate impact of this is enormous. So, like, this is not really, like, there's some very specific effects for the community around the toxicity of this proposal. But the impacts of this proposal are much bigger. And the reason, for example, why the application in Waimati in South Canterbury was called in is because that affects the whole of the South Island. It's not just that little district. And the fact of the matter is, this is potentially Auckland's rubbish. This is Hamilton's rubbish. This is Tauranga rubbish. This is Whakatani's rubbish. So I think for anybody who's concerned about, who's concerned about climate change and the very real effects of climate change, like the stuff we've seen on the East Coast with the cyclones, like building anything in a flood zone like this in this day and age is crazy. Yeah, a facility like this is crazy. And the pollution to the water, the pollution to the air is something that affects all of us. So yeah, I think everybody's got a stake in this. Sorry, I'm just going back. And it's important to, speaking to submissions, yes, I would encourage people to say that they want to speak to their submission, even if you decide subsequently that you don't want to speak to it, that's fine. At least you preserve your options. I'll be posting this recording to the Zero Waste YouTube channel, and I will post a link to it on the Don't Burn Waipā Facebook page tomorrow. The meeting tomorrow night is a public meeting at the Baptist Church, and that's some people in the community that have organized that. That's going to be some more information sharing. Dale Marie, do you want to talk to that at all?
Tina koutou, tina koe Val. Kia ora koutou, just to let you know, hey Cliffy, can you mute yourself? Because every time you clink your dish curry, we revert off to your screen. And anyone else that isn't muted, if you can mute, please. Tomorrow night is at the Te Awamutu Chapel on Chapel Road. It starts at 7:30. We will have some people there to support you with in-person submissions. But at 8 o'clock, we'll be listening to Paul Connett, who we weren't able to hear the audio on Wednesday last week, at the community board. This professor has a huge background in resisting incinerations because he's an onto-it professor. And so he'll be waking up at stupid o'clock, I understand, in Europe to present to us here in Aotearoa at 8 o'clock. So yeah, if you are free and you are able to come, Te Awamutu Chapel, Chapel Road at 7:30 tomorrow night.
Yeah. Kia ora, Dale Marie. Thank you very much. Somebody notes the Member of Parliament, Barbara Kruger, is attending tomorrow night, I think. So, yeah, I would strongly encourage you all to make your feelings known to her about this. Someone asks, is Maniapoi or any other iwi involved in getting this application declined, as this could affect all of them? Dale Marie, I don't know if you want to answer that. What I would say is that my understanding from the resource consent application is that there has not been a full cultural impact assessment conducted. And we would ask that a full cultural impact assessment is conducted. The contractor, the company has some links to one of the iwi, but I think that there isn't very clear support one way or the other from any of the iwi about it. So there's some support and there's also some concerns about it. Yeah.
I'll just one point, New Zealand Bandit, I see that you asked that question. If you can make direct contact with me, I can discuss with you around that a little bit more.
And Sarah McFarlane asked, so why has the Fielding case not been setting the precedent for it being no everywhere? Well, that's a great question, Sarah. The Fielding case was a different kind of technology in the first instance. It's called that proposal was for what's called pyrolysis. So that's where they take rubbish and they heat it up, but they don't heat it as high as they would in an incinerator. They heat it up and then it gases, it releases a gas, and then they condense the gas and then they burn the gas for energy. So it's a slightly different process. This process here is just a kind of stock standard incinerator. They throw the rubbish in, they add some diesel fuel, they light a match, they heat it up, and the heat heats some water, which turns into steam, and the steam turns turbines. And that's how they generate electricity. So it's in some ways quite a simpler technology. The other thing in Fielding is that the application was withdrawn by the company rather than the commissioners saying no. So that was the other reason, I guess, why it hasn't necessarily set a precedent. Oh, yeah, right. Your points to raise is great. Thank you. Is there somewhere we can add our own points to raise awareness of things so that others can add them to their submissions? That's a really good idea. I wonder, Brody, could we just do that on the Facebook page? Otherwise, I could create a document on Zero Waste, and we could share that document, and everybody could add into that. So there's a couple of options. We could put something on the Facebook group, and people then could add stuff onto that. But I think that's a really good idea. So I'll have a little bit of a think about that. Are submissions confidential or public? Yep, submissions will be made public. Thanks, Simon. Yeah. Yes. Michelle raises the issue about fire. A couple of possibilities that were mentioned to me today is that if there's an explosion, it has the potential to blow out our windows. Also, if there was a fire, it could be huge, and we only have a volunteer fire brigade. For some of you who were at the public meeting last week, I shared the story about the incinerator in Doral, Florida, Doral. I recommend that you look at it on the internet. There's heaps of media footage of the incinerator fire. It burned for 3 weeks in February this year, excuse me. This incinerator burned for 3 weeks. It's in the middle of a community, just, like actually a much, much more populated area than Te Awamutu. This thing burned to the ground. So yeah, the air pollution was just incredible. So the fact that Te Awamutu only has a volunteer fire brigade, it's completely crazy that they would consider putting a facility like this, because this is effectively is a hazardous facility. And they're putting this in the middle of a community, and they're just saying, oh, well, you all take your chances. So I think it's a really good point to raise about the possibility of fire and explosion. Yeah, you can request that your personal information not be included in your submission. Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that's what fuel fires the incinerator. So Reese is asked, what fuel fires the incinerator? It's diesel. And one of the interesting things about this application is that they've said that they want to store 5,000 liters of diesel on site for the incinerator. 5,000 liters of diesel means that they don't need a resource consent for the storage of the diesel. But the reality is that they need about 40,000 liters of diesel just for a cold start. So they actually are not telling the truth about how much diesel. They don't actually seem to know how much diesel they need, because they have to keep the temperature of the fire at a certain they have to keep it at a certain temperature, and if it falls below that temperature, the trouble is, of course, is that it emits a lot more toxic stuff. So they need to keep it above 850 degrees for at least 2 seconds before it leaves the stacks, and that requires quite a lot of diesel. Yeah, the facility in Germany that they've modeled this off of, it doesn't use diesel, it uses natural gas. And they use nearly 1 million cubic meters of natural gas, which is almost the same amount of liters of diesel. So if you convert 1 million cubic meters of natural gas, it's almost 900,000 liters of diesel. And they're saying that's an equivalent facility. So I'm not like yeah, it's really hard to overstate how concerning it is that their figures around how much diesel they're going to need are so wrong. They've made such an underestimation, and they've repeated that throughout the application as if that's the truth, but they don't actually they don't have any information about how much diesel. And just by contrast, the application for down in Waimāti in Canterbury, they're saying that they're going to store 100,000 liters of diesel there. Now that's a proposal that's about a little bit more than twice the size of this, but they're saying quite openly in their application 100,000 liters of diesel on site, which would be requires a resource consent of its own. So this is the thing, is that company hasn't applied for that resource consent, and they haven't done so because they don't seem to know how much fuel they're actually going to need. Yeah, someone says, what happens if there's a diesel shortage? Absolutely. What happens if they don't have diesel on site? What happens is that probably they're going to keep burning stuff, and it's going to be at a temperature lower than what it's legally meant to be, and the community is going to wear the effects of that. So Lisa asks, Te Awamutu air quality is not currently being monitored. Why is this? Lisa, but gosh, I wish I knew the answer to that question. It seems like the last air monitoring done was in about 2015 or 2016. That's another concerning thing about this application, is that it's using data from places which are not Te Awamutu. So they're using data from 3 other places, and they're trying to say, well, if we kind of average those 3 things, one of them's Hamilton. Sorry, I can't even remember what the other 2 are. And they're also using data from Te Awamutu that's about 8 or 9 years old. So most of their data is not, it's not really accurate. You can't really say, like a friend of mine who lived in Te Awamutu told me that, that a lot of times the air just sits in the valley there. So it just sort of, there's not wind, and there's not really been very much, there's no discussion in the document about that kind of what's called an inversion, where the air just sits in the community. So it doesn't seem to me that the air modeling, thank you, somebody's posted Tokanui, Hamilton Airport, and Waikiri are weather stations used for air modeling. Yeah, excellent. So they've used areas which are not, they're not Te Awamutu. And that makes a big difference. Like, so there's so many things that are kind of not really right about this application. The diesel is one of them. The fact that this plant in Germany, it doesn't burn tires. Like, they don't use tire derived fuel there. They use essentially mixed solid waste. And these different kinds of fuels, it's just like if you were making a fire in your fireplace, if you're using, nice hardwood to burn in your fireplace, you're going to have a nice fire. If you decide to make a fire with plastics, and some rubbish that you found on the beach or whatever, and you make a fire, what's going to come out of your smokestack is going to be very different than if you're burning normal firewood. Like, they need to tell us what their air emissions are from what they're actually proposing. So we don't know what's in flock. They're just saying, oh, it's the remains from the scrap metal industry. Well, we don't know what that is. Like, is there toxic stuff? Is there hazardous waste in there? Is there asbestos? What, you can't just say, oh, well, we're going to burn this stuff and, don't worry about it, kind of thing. It's not acceptable. Worst case scenario that this goes through, they build it, and these things that they lied about in their consent come to light. Do they have to shut down until it's resolved or stopped, or do they just pay a fine and keep burning? Well, Brody, that's a very good question. In many cases, if they don't meet the conditions of the consent, they are given an abatement notice. And so sometimes they're given an opportunity to remedy the situation, or they're given a fine. But what we've seen with this company, literally these very people, they've had a case taken to the environment court already by the regional council. They don't seem to be people that are particularly interested in abiding by their resource consent conditions. So we really need to ensure that it doesn't get built, because I don't think that we can count on that to happen. One of the interesting things I wanted to bring to everyone's attention, though, is that in the United States, in the state of Oregon, they've just passed a law that says that they have to have continuous monitoring of the stacks. So all of the dioxin, all of the acid gases like sulfuric acid and everything, that has to be continuously monitored and published every half an hour on a website. So those are the kinds of things that we would be asking for. If we, what we're going to say is, if the commissioners do decide that they're going to grant consent to this thing, we're going to say, okay, well, we want to see these kinds of conditions of consent, which would include publicly available continuous monitoring, because that's the best available technology is continuous monitoring. And then the community can see exactly what's going on in terms of the air emissions and stuff like that. So, and there's a whole lot of other conditions that people in the community might think about, that might be useful in terms of noise, in terms of dust and odor, all of those kinds of things that might ultimately lessen the impact of those things. But those aren't things we probably need to think about right at the moment. At the moment, we just want to say to the councils, we want to decline this application. If we get to the point where they're saying, oh, well, maybe we're going to grant consent, that we're going to be saying, well, we think there needs to be certain conditions imposed. So, yeah. I hope that answered Brody's question. To some extent, they just keep operating. Yeah. So we need to make sure that they don't get consent. I would say, though, that my understanding certainly is that there could be a situation where they were granted consent to build it, but the conditions were so severe that they decided not to build it because they could not abide by the conditions. So that's another possibility, that the conditions are so onerous that they really can't make it work. So, you know, they're saying they need to operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, if we're saying, well, actually, no, not in a residential neighborhood, you know, you can't operate 24 hours a day. You can operate 12 hours a day. They would say, nah, we can't make it work. So those are the kinds of conditions that might just completely stop the project in its tracks. So I encourage everybody to know that, number one, we can win. Number two, we are going to win. But number three, winning doesn't always look like exactly what you think it looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean the application is declined in the first round. So that's why I was trying to prepare everybody last week for, you know, we've definitely got a bit of a fight on our hands. But I feel really, really inspired by the community, and I feel really confident that we will win. Yeah, it's just going to be a bit of a fight along the way. So yes, we will win. So we've got a couple minutes. Are there other questions that people have? Okay. I just want to encourage people. I think Simon from Go Eco, Simon's on the call with us tonight. Simon's going to be at the meeting tomorrow night. Are there other ways to spread the news other than just Facebook? Yes, I would say there are definitely. Is anything known about where the financial backing is coming? I'll just say about spreading the news other than Facebook. So I was going to say, Simon's going to be at the meeting tomorrow night. He's interested in talking to people that want to be involved in a kind of a core group for ongoing organizing. And we need to get, you know, ideally, like I saw in the Facebook group, that people have been doing leafleting around the community, and that's amazing, awesome stuff. So we just want to get a core group together that's going to help keep things ticking over for the next 6 months, that might decide that they want to organize a film screening, they want to organize some public talks, they want to organize a protest outside of the councils. You might want to organize a delegation to talk to whoever becomes the member of parliament. It might be Barbara Kruger, it might be somebody else. I'm not sure what the situation is in your electorate. Yeah, you might want to talk to the new minister for the environment. So you might have a delegation that comes down to Wellington to talk to whoever that might be. That Scott Simpson is the guy from the National Party who's kind of the minister for the environment in waiting, I guess. He's based up in Coromandel. So there's a woman called Rachel Brooking who's the Labour Party waste kind of person. So those are all things that a community group could do. Yeah, and I just have someone, Carrie Taylor says on the form, it says the reasons for my views are we supposed to scientifically backing up our views? No, Carrie, you do not need to provide some kind of scientific or background evidence or whatever else. You don't need to answer that question. If you don't feel like, you can just say, you know, I don't want toxic waste in my community. I don't want more air pollution in my community. I don't want the health effects. But it might also be an opportunity to say, the reason for my view is, you know, I have a child who has asthma. I have, you know, I have grandparents, and I'm concerned about their health and their well-being. Or, you know, I'm concerned about climate change. I'm concerned about waste minimization. I'm concerned about plastic use and, you know, burning plastics. So you don't feel obliged too much to stick to what they're asking you to do in terms of your submission. You just say what you want to say. Tell everyone you can, and tell them several times. Too many people aren't aware of this. Yes. Can a new government or current stop this on our submissions? So the last thing I'll just talk to is that it is possible that the central government could call this application in the same way that the application in Waimati has been called in. And what that means is that rather than it being heard by the commissioners, it would go straight to Environment Court, and it would be heard by the Environment Court. What would be really good about that, if that did happen, is that the Environment Court could take climate change into consideration. So they could take the fact that this is going to be a huge climate bomb into consideration as part of this proposal. As it is right now with the resource consent commissioners, they can't really take climate into account because of when this application was filed. And as I mentioned, the law change to the Resource Management Act came into effect last year, and the company filed right before that law change. It would need for the regional council and for the district council basically to make that request of central government. And I guess Bree is asking, can we push for that to happen? I would encourage you all as a community to talk about that. Is that what you want to have happen? If it is, and maybe there's good reasons for that to happen, I would encourage you to push hard for that now. I would certainly support you if you all wanted to do that. I guess the downside of that, the downside of it being moved to that level, is that our ability to input is more limited. So we put more trust in central government, in the Environment Court, to make the right decision. So our ability to appeal that is much more limited. So there's pros and cons that are out of that. And I'm really happy to, if you all want to talk more about that in the coming weeks, I could probably organize a resource management lawyer to talk with you all a little bit. And some of the people down in Waimāti, the community in Waimāti, they're very well organized and happy to come and talk with you all anytime. If you all want somebody from the Waste Waimāti group to come and talk to the community, they could come along on a Zoom call or whatever and also talk with you all about the kind of stuff that they've been doing. The applicants do claim that there are benefits for Te Awamutu. If you have a look on the regional council link to the application, they have an economic assessment. And so they're saying, in the economic assessment, they're saying it's really great for Te Awamutu. There'll be heaps of jobs created. It'll bring money into the community, that kind of thing. So they certainly are claiming that it will be positive for the community. Yeah. We'll probably wrap up. I just want everyone to know I go on to the Don't Burn Waipā Facebook page, and I do post stuff on there from time to time. But if people have questions, feel free to post questions and things. I'm happy to try to answer questions as much as possible. And as somebody suggested earlier, we might try to figure out what some kind of forum is for the community to share your own ideas about stuff that you could put in submission. So if anybody has some ideas about what might be a good space where people could put in different ideas about stuff to share in your submission, maybe you could let me know, and yeah, we can see if we can figure out a really good way to do that, because I think it's a great idea to the kind of, it's kind of like the hive mind when we all get together, because I note that there's a lot of people in the community in Te Awamutu that actually, they know a lot about this application already. They've been studying these documents for months. And I feel like together we've got a lot of collective knowledge. So I just want to thank everybody for your time and your energy. And I want to say how sorry I am that that we're having to fight this, but I'm really happy to be fighting with you people. Yeah, this is very, very inspiring to me. All the people that are concerned and willing to stand up for yourselves and for your community. So yeah, I look forward to us all getting to know each other a little bit better in the coming days. yeah, and I wish I wasn't quite so far away. I had a heck of a drive back last week from Te Awamutu on Wednesday. So yeah, but I will be back up when it comes time for the hearing. I will definitely be back up in the community and get to spend a little bit more time there. So yeah, thanks everybody, and feel free to reach out to me if you've got questions. You can always find me at kiora@zerowaste.co.nz or reach out to Go Eco. And Simon and Kelly over at Go Eco are also a great resource as well, who are based over in Hamilton. So I just want to close with a little karakia to leave this space behind and to wish you all well with your meeting tomorrow night and with your submissions in the next week and a half or so. So don't be late getting your submission in. Yeah. Kei te mihi ki a koutou. Unuhia te pō whiri marama, tomo kia te ao whatu tangata, tatai ki runga, tatai ki raro, tatai ahurau, haumi e hui e, tae ki e. Kei te mihi.
Kia ora, Val.
O Māori e whānau.
O Mari.
Thank you, Val.